All right, everyone. Hey, we are back. We're so excited, and I am really honored to have our next guest join us here on Note Camp, and a great way to wrap up day two. A lady that I really look up to, been a friend for a while in the industry, who absolutely just does an amazing job and has a big heart for really helping other real estate investors overcome obstacles and really make things happen and educate those out there. She is the editor-in-chief of Self-Directed Investor Magazine. It's a bi-monthly print and digital publication for investors using self-directed retirement accounts to invest in alternative assets, including real estate and private loans. And so we're always glad to have Carole Ellis joining us today. So welcome to Note. This is the first time you're on Note Camp, I think, too, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're honored to have you. And I'll tell you, our first speaker of the day, Dan Krasowski, was like, oh my God, I get to speak on the same day as Carole and Brian. Brian's speaking tomorrow. And just a great stuff. So I'm really excited because there's so many people. Here's a little thing. I have an attendee survey, and I've been looking at as people are filling stuff out. 60% of those attendants don't have a self-directed IRA account of any sort. So it gives you a little bit of challenge. I'm glad you're starting the presentation off. So I will pull my camera off, but I'll be here and fielding things, encourage people to ask questions. But we're going to try to save most of the questions at the very end for everybody. Okay. Stuff.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Scott. As Scott said, I'm Carole Ellis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Self-Directed Investor Magazine, and I probably sent him a typo in the bio because we are actually quarterly print and digital. But we are a publication for self-directed investors, and we're part of Self-Directed Investors Society, or SDI Society. We have one sole function, and it is advocacy for self-directed investors. We are not administrators, we're not custodians, we're not financial advisors, but we are educators, and we're advocates for self-directed investors. And so I always love being able to work with Scott and with note investors, because not only are private notes a really great way to grow your retirement capital in your self-directed IRA account, but real estate notes and real estate investors of all types are some of the most creative and flexible and innovative populations of investors out there. So it's always exciting to be with a group like you, because you're active and imaginative and you're really driven to build your portfolios, and that makes it really fun for me. So thank you. And so having told you what I'm getting out of this, which is being with y'all, let's get started talking about you and how to grow your note portfolio using your self-directed IRA in the post-pandemic economy. And I should say that if you do not have an IRA, a self-directed IRA or self-directed 401k, you should absolutely continue listening, because one of the things that we deal with is how to grow and accelerate your retirement capital quickly using a self-directed account. And notes are a really great way to do that. So with that, I'm going to share my screen so that you can see my PowerPoint, because me talking for an hour might get a little old. So 1 second. All right. So can you all see this now?
Yes, ma'am. Looking good.
Awesome. All right. So the coronavirus pandemic and the American response to it has created one of the worst economic downturns in nearly 100 years. And regardless of where you draw your personal party lines, and some people have been drawing them, I noticed, the effects of our self-imposed economic shutdowns, shelter-in-place mandates, and stay-at-home orders have been devastating to national, state, and local economies. So we've got 39+ million people unemployed, or they have at least filed for unemployment since mid-March. A number of those individuals will not have jobs to go back to, or they will choose to remain unemployed as long as possible due to a combination of factors, including concerns for health, and also because they're more financially benefited by staying home and reaping the benefits of government stimulus packages. So our government dove headfirst into the most massive stimulus spree in history. They raised the national debt per citizen to more than $77,000, and the debt per taxpayer to more than $205,000. So that means your newborn basically owes $77,000 on the national debt. But of course, don't worry, that obligation and some more will be assigned to you. And to make matters worse, and probably a little more unstable by the time the stimulus does run out, Harvard researchers predict that about 100,000 small businesses, and probably some larger ones, will have closed their doors permanently because they are either unable to adapt to the new curbside economy, or They are located in states that wouldn't permit them to operate even in what we're calling the new normal. So why am I telling you all this stuff? Isn't this supposed to be about how to access the right opportunities for your self-directed investment capital, use lots of note strategies, and basically, use everything you're learning today at Note Camp to solve these problems? Yes, but I'm telling you these scary statistics to drive home how very important it is that you identify opportunities that do not have any one of 3 fatal flaws that will undermine the stability and, even more importantly right now, the predictability of your investments, particularly in this economy, when you need to be looking more carefully than ever at the collateral that is securing your notes and loans. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to dive into the 3 fatal flaws in post-pandemic investments that can make your investment look like an incredible opportunity, but will actually threaten every single cent of your investment capital should you choose to invest in one of those projects or vehicles. So for many investors, a lot of times when we talk about this, the training kind of stops there because these fatal flaws are the end of the line. They're either not equipped, they're not creative enough to adjust their strategies to accommodate some of the investing parameters today. However, as note investors, for you, knowing these 3 fatal flaws is just kind of the beginning, because the combination of note investing and your self-directed retirement account is a really, really powerful combination. So that's very exciting. So before we begin, let's agree on a few things just to make our time moving forward a little more productive, because we'll all be starting from the same starting line, so to speak. So let's agree that the reopening of state and national economies will create massive opportunities for self-directed investors and for real estate and real estate related asset investors. Now, I will demonstrate, and it's also, I think it's pretty obvious at this point, it's not actually necessary to wait for economies to reopen. So if you are located in a city or state that is closed until after Labor Day, you can stop holding your breath. But I do want to focus right now on the fact that we're facing a time of unprecedented opportunity for self-directed investors and for note investors. So if you ever thought to yourself in the past, oh, I wish I had bought X when prices are down, now is your time. So let's move on. Second, let's agree that good opportunities are great for self-directed investors and note investors, but not every opportunity is a good one. If you bought Facebook stock when it opened at $38 odd a share in 2012, you would have 600% growth, more or less, at this point. However, if you had purchased Barnes & Noble stock around the same time, which was trading down around $10, you would be down by nearly half your investment capital. Of course, that's a little oversimplified, but you get the idea. You're note investors, so the odds are good. You are probably not interested solely in investing in stocks, which are certainly a staple for the vast majority of retirement investors. But as you probably know, they are not necessarily a recipe for predictable returns, economic insulation from recessions and downturns, or a good night's sleep. So we are only going to talk stocks for the purposes of illustration, and I promise we will get into the really good stuff next. So third, I think we can all agree that one thing stands out clearly when we look at our debt clock, taxpayer obligation, spiraling debt associated with every single American citizen. That is, you are on your own. No matter what we want to think, the government is not here to help. They can't. It's too big. So if you want to enjoy financial security in retirement, if you want to know that your retirement is not on ice, if you want to have some degree of control over your financial freedom and your financial future and that of your family, you are on your own. And again, you're at the right place. You're learning about note investing. You are already taking control, and that is great. So normally at this point, I would give you a rousing speech about how the time has come to take the reins, but you have already done that. So let's talk about how you can leverage your knowledge of note investing and what you're learning this weekend in a self-directed retirement account to help you continue moving forward with that. And of course, since we were going to talk about note investing using your self-directed retirement account, let's take a moment to establish exactly what a self-directed retirement account is. So self-directed investing, self-directed IRA, self-directed 401k, these are all terms that we are hearing thrown around more and more lately. And a lot of the time, everyone in the conversation is sort of saying them and everybody is nodding like they are very wise and they know exactly what's going on, but really probably not everyone knows what's going on. So I think that is very important that we start out by clearing some of these things up. So an IRA, an individual retirement account, is a financial account that gives you tax breaks in exchange for saving and investing for retirement. A self-directed IRA gives you pretty much unlimited freedom in how you invest your retirement savings. And a captive IRA, which is a term that was coined by our publisher, Carole Ellis, imposes limits on the asset types that can be purchased within the IRA. So generally, a captive IRA will not permit note investing or real estate investing or precious metals investing or any other private loans or pretty much anything else other than very conventional stocks, bonds, and maybe mutual funds. So you can also have a self-directed 401k. You absolutely should if you are eligible, but I will mainly today, for our purposes, refer to self-directed retirement accounts versus IRAs or 401ks, because the really important thing here is that you need the self-directed account, and then you can work with your IRA or your 401k company or your tax attorney to figure out which one is the best for you. So the really important thing here is the self-directed part, because you cannot invest in notes. You cannot generate tax advantage returns that come with wise note investing unless you are using that self-directed account. And you can learn, there are many different subsets of that. And you can learn about those on the Self-Directed Investor Magazine website or any number of other places. So now let's tackle those 3 fatal flaws, and then we will move into using your self-directed account to start growing that note portfolio. So the 3 fatal flaws associated with investments that are available today and will likely come before you as a note investor, either because you are being asked to loan on projects or because project managers need liquidity and they are just sort of interested in your assets in general. The 3 fatal flaws in those projects are actually pretty easy to spot. So that is the good news. The bad news for everyone that is not on this webinar right now is that they're really easily camouflaged. The majority of the investing population right now has realized that number 3 in our agreement, that you're on your own, is in full effect. And investors are really desperate to get their capital out there. So people are actually really throwing money at anything that looks like it's got a good upside. And it's very easy as a self-directed investor and as a note investor, which makes you a very attractive person for people who need funding to talk to get carried away. So there's some really easy red flags that you can look for to identify these fatal flaws. So the first one is that the success factor is flying solo. If you are considering, for example, loaning on a fix and flip deal, but you find out the investor is counting on selling to another investor who is not identified or in the picture yet, who's going to use it as an Airbnb, there's some pretty big problems with your potential payback. There might not be an investor who wants to rely on the hospitality or tourism industries right now. The flip could be high end and it could take too long and sit on the market and you wait for the note to pay off. It could be an estate that isn't really letting people Airbnb right now. So that's just one example, but basically if you're in the business of making a certain type of loan right now that is very contingent on a certain series of things happening, or if you're in the business of buying those loans later, you really have to carefully consider your exit strategies to make sure that it has more than one outcome that will actually make things a success for you as the note investor. Red flag number 2 is something that Joel referred to, and I was so happy to hear him talking about that because this is so important right now. If you are dealing with a corona susceptible location or strategy, that's, again, none of this is a no-go, but it means you really have to, this is a big red flag. Our country is great, and it's a very unique creation. We have a federal government, but we also have states that have a massive amount of power and control over our lives via our state governors and our state legislatures. And as our economies reopen, those state level forces are creating enormous havoc in some places, and really an incredible amount of support and growth in others, depending on how the governor and the state legislature is opting to handle the business side of reopening. For this reason, investments that you are making right now will be impacted by the state governments that influence them, for good or for bad. So make sure that you're not just familiar with the strategy or the details but also how the project is going to work within the confines of state restrictions, state parameters, and state support, because some states are supporting like crazy and some states are not supporting investors or business at all. So here's a prime example. Again, that's probably gonna feel pretty familiar. Single family rentals, both short and long term, are pretty classic asset for self-directed investors and real estate investors. So, as note investors that, investors are going out, they buy at the right price, the right area, they get cash flow and appreciation, and historically, some pretty secure income. Right now in a lot of areas, the prices on these assets are very attractive. But you still have to be careful where you are investing. And I am going to go back a little bit to vacation rentals just because it is such a good geographic example. If you were to invest if you were to loan on a vacation rental in Michigan, you could find yourself with a borrower who turns out they can not only not rent the property out because it's prohibited to rent them, they can't even employ someone to open them after the winter. However, of course, to make this even more complicated, in Michigan, this is latitudinally determined because northern Michigan is partially open and a part of the southern state is not. And there are some exceptions that might make that a great place to, own a note anyway, but it's going to hinge very much on your strategy. So there's that. And then to sort of compound this even further, there are other assets that are extremely popular and attractive right now. RV parks, mobile home parks. Largely considered essential, but not universally considered essential. It depends on the state. So even then, the fatal flaw doesn't really reach across the board of assets, but you have to understand, I cannot emphasize enough because it's just breaking my heart what's happening to some investors in some of these states. I can't emphasize enough how clearly the asset is going to be impacted in the event that your state doesn't think it's essential, doesn't think you're essential, or doesn't think somebody who is operating somehow crucially in that asset is essential. And as an investor, if that's your collateral, you have to have a plan for how you're going to deal with those various, options in the event that the state doesn't respond the way you want. So, our third red flag is the third fatal flaw. It is the easiest to spot and it is the hardest to resist. So one of the things that makes this hard is it hasn't always been a fatal flaw, but you need to keep an eye out for it because it is right now. The fatal flaw is inexperienced investment management. Prior to the spring of this year, we were enjoying one of the longest running economic growth periods in our government's history, our country's history. And it was a time when even new investors could dive into various asset classes, dive into new strategies, and even if they really didn't know what they were doing, a lot of the time they were coming out okay. And that is a wonderful time to get started investing. But let's be honest, now is not that time. You either need to be working with borrowers and experience in the areas in which they're working, or you need people on your side, like Scott, like the many people at this event, working with you to identify those good lending opportunities and the right notes for your portfolio and your investment strategies. And preferably, you need both. And to be honest, right now, you need advisors on the note investing side and the self-directed investing side, because right now, if you have investment capital in your self-directed retirement account, you are a very, very attractive note investor to know. There are going to be a lot of people who want to present you with various opportunities, and some of them are going to be almost, but not quite golden, because the person who wants to borrow that capital doesn't have the experience and the mileage to make the project a success, or they don't actually understand how to work with self-directed investment capital. And then they put you at risk in terms of violating the very few restrictions placed on those accounts by the IRS. So if you're a newbie self-directed investor, even if you're an experienced note investor, you are absolutely not out of luck. But you don't want to sink your capital into an asset class or a strategy you don't have a history with, unless, of course, you are sinking it into that with someone who does have a good history, a long history, and a demonstrably successful history, not just in investing, but investing and pivoting to pull projects out of the fire and keep generating those returns or making those payments. So those are our three fatal flaws, and that is our first lesson. Look for them. Do not fork over your capital until you have fully addressed them. And now that we've talked about identifying the wrong opportunities, which is never as much fun, which is why I do it first, let's move to the second facet of protecting and growing your note portfolio in the reopening economy, which is accessing the right opportunities in today's market, or your need for speed. So, as a self-directed investor, and again, if you do not yet have a self-directed retirement account, they are very easy to set up. So we will deal with that a little bit later. Mainly, you just need to get in touch with the right IRA or 401k company. So you have a lot of flexibility when it comes to your investing. But one thing you may not necessarily have, and this is very important if you are starting out with this, and you may not have a lot of capital, you don't necessarily have the ability to accelerate your investment process if you are working with one of what I will call one of the slower IRA companies that might take 90 or even 180 days to facilitate a transaction. And it's not illegal for them to do that. And it's in their fine print that they can. But if you are serious about finding the right opportunities in real estate, as you well know, that can be a really long time to wait. And this is true for note investors and most other real estate investors and people who invest in real estate related assets. So there are two types of acceleration that you need to be considering as a self-directed note investor in order to be able to access the right opportunities in today's market. The first type is someone that not everyone should have access to, and this is going to be another one of those things you've probably heard people saying, but a lot of people don't really know how they work. Not everyone should have access to this, but if you are a responsible self-directed investor, and if you are a responsible note investor, you like to keep your records straight, all that, then this is a game changer. It is the checkbook IRA. And selfdirected.org and SDI Magazine is so fortunate because our legal counsel is actually one of the major players in the invention of the checkbook IRA. So you can get all the details about that on our website. But as an overview, in order to have a checkbook IRA, you need a self-directed IRA, and then you have some special structures lined up that lets you basically write checks out of the IRA directly. If you do this without this, then you are just blowing up your IRA, so don't do it. It's called checkbook control, and it is one of the best ways to do things like buy real estate at auction, make fast acquisitions. There are any number, I'm sure you can imagine the number of things you could do if you have checkbook access to your retirement funds. But it does rule out oversight from your custodian or administrator. You do need to make very sure that you understand exactly what is and isn't allowed if you have a checkbook IRA, and you still need a really good custodian holding the account so you can make sure to have the right structures in place to make the whole thing kosher for the IRS. So that's the first type of acceleration, and you will find it very helpful if you decide to use it. And the second type is something that we encounter a lot at SDI Society, and that is the need to accelerate your returns. So in some cases, we find members feel confined by their annual contribution limits. More often than that, we find they fear they've mainly just they've waited too long to start investing in assets like real estate or notes that offer higher returns and that are, more importantly, more predictable than conventional assets. So if you fall in those categories, you are probably feeling some pressure to accelerate right now. And that's understandable because these are uncertain times. And most of us would feel better with more capital deployed in reliable assets that we can make predictions about that are relatively certain and that will generate returns and help us sleep at night. So fortunately for you, this type of acceleration is not as impossible as it might feel if you just look at annual contribution limits. If you're only permitted to contribute $5,000 a year or so, and you're not even sure if you can do it right now, well, should you be a self-directed investor? Absolutely, because you have a lot of options that you may not be aware of. You actually need a fairly small amount of capital in that self-directed account to start investing and generating returns. As soon as you generate those returns, you don't have to wait to use them. You turn right around and generate some more. And we actually recently published a report in the magazine on the topic, and we explored 3 really solid options. Note investing was actually one of them for low capital, high activity investors really intent on that sort of return acceleration. And I'll be happy to tell you how to get that later. And we've also updated it to factor in our more recent economic developments. But of course, right now, I want to focus on one of the most specific assets in that report, because note investing is something you can do even if you do not have a massive amount of capital. So there are several things that make note investing ideal for self-directed investors, and it makes self-directing ideal for note investors. First of all, it's highly flexible. Just, you know, in the hour of that panel alone, you got a pretty incredible cross-section of the things that you can do. When I say note investing, every single person on this call knows what I'm talking about, but you also are thinking of your different favorite strategy. It can mean making short-term loans on fix and flip projects. It can mean investing in long-term 30-year A papers. It can mean all sorts of other things, from investing in leverage loans, partial loans, many, many other types of notes, and all sorts of things that you were learning about this weekend. So that flexibility makes notes great for self-directed investors, but it does come at a cost. And please take this seriously. Get your advice before you invest using your self-directed retirement account capital. You want to be 100% sure you are not inadvertently committing a prohibited transaction. And that is a whole lesson in itself. So I'm just going to say that for now, as Tim Berry, our legal counsel says, please take 5 minutes to ask your IRA or 401k attorney or expert before you invest. Save yourself hours of time and thousands of dollars of trouble later if you get it wrong. So love the flexibility, but be responsible and get that expert advice before you take the plunge. Second, private notes tend to be pretty hands-off. You need them managed, but you can hire a service to do this, and it helps you keep yourself far away from those prohibited transactions and interactions with your retirement capital. The IRS decided to create IRAs and 401ks and offer you all these incredible advantages, basically so you would shore up your retirement, not so that you could have your cake today in the form of tax advantages and eat it tomorrow as well. Although our publisher, Carole Ellis, is going to dive into some of the more attractive strategies in the having your cake and eating it too regard tomorrow. And third of all, note investing is great for self-directed investors because it's straightforward. I know that you are loving all the information you're getting at Note Camp. And one thing that I love about note investing is that even the complicated stuff, you can get it and you can grasp it pretty quickly if you will really take the time and put the focus in to learn it the first time. There are a lot of investment strategies that change constantly because of, they only work for a few months or a few years or whatever. But if you allow for the post-pandemic flaws we've already talked about, and a few common mistakes that we see new self-directed note investors make regularly, and those are next, don't worry, you'll be in good shape. And as Brian likes to say, note investing fits self-directed investors and self-directed investor society criteria because it is three things. It's simple, it's safe, and it's strong. And if you respect your capital enough to want to grow it, but also protect it, then note investing is a really great way to do so. And as I mentioned, you don't necessarily need hundreds of thousands of dollars in your self-directed account to get started. And that really leads me to the final leg of our presentation, which are the three common mistakes self-directed investors make about private notes and loans. Now, as advocates and investors, good gracious, can't talk. As advocates and educators for self-directed investors, one thing that does happen a lot for us at SDI Magazine and SDI Society is we hear a lot of if-onlys. And I don't actually mean if-onlys from investors, although we do hear those too. I mean from the people who are serving you as investors and as self-directed investors. Self-directed servicers are often prohibited from giving you investment advice. They can't guide you there. It's illegal. You can ask them and they will try to be nice about it, but they really can't do so. Your self-directed IRA custodian or administrator is not supposed to tell you how to invest, even though so many people call them up and ask them constantly. They are legally prohibited. And some interpret this in more muted tones than others. But if you call up your IRA company and you say, hey, should I buy a 5-year partial or make a private loan on a single family rental? They are not going to say a whole lot about that. They're not allowed to. They shouldn't. It's their job to help you transact. It's not their job to help you evaluate deals or make value judgments. However, that does not mean that a custodian who has decades of experience working with investors in notes or real estate or some other asset class, or just who's been a custodian for decades, that doesn't mean they don't have a massive amount of knowledge. And that's where these if onlys come in, because we hear it constantly. If only investors knew is one of my favorite sentences ever, because when I hear it, I start taking notes. It's like a special outtakes edition that everybody should watch, but most people never get to see. And one of the topics I hear an awful lot of if onlys about is self-directed note investing. So I have a list of the top three common mistakes administrators and custodians say that they see self-directed investors make about their private loans and their private notes. So first, they fail to hold the first lien, and they aren't holding second or third on purpose for some other strategy. In general, make sure your loan is in the first position. This is what one thing we hear, that investors either don't understand that part, or they don't understand when they get paid. And so they're confused when they're not the first to get paid when the collateral is collected or sold. If you're not sure how, or if you're not sure why, then ask your attorney, and also ask your, ask your experts here for advice on how to leverage that information to make sure that you are making wise decisions about what position your note is in. And again, if you have a strategy that involves holding a lien in a different position, you're probably not new to this. That asterisk is for you. Second of all, you may find this hard to believe, but I have many friends in the IRA and 401k custodial business who tell me they see self-directed note investors leaving small, important details out of their loan agreements, like they forget to include actual information on the collateral. And that really is something that I have one particular friend who raves about this constantly, because it comes out later that they forgot to file it, or something, something happened, and all of a sudden the collateral is not actually on record. They forget to include terms about dealing with late payments and prepayments. This makes it really hard to collect what's owed. And in some cases, it makes it impossible. Again, that's why you're here. You are learning these things, and it's just really important, because people do it over and over. Now that you've learned them, make sure you don't forget them. Put them in there. You want to make sure that you are protected in the event not only that you must foreclose, or that your borrower decides to pay off the note early because your IRA custodian or administrator needs those terms in there so that they know what to do and they can help you make those things work out the way they should. And finally, self-directed investors make a big mistake about note investing, because they think, and I don't know why particularly, is that in an economic downturn that comes with mortgage forbearance or other outside factors that affect our borrowers and our lenders, they feel like there are not enough good opportunities out there to lend on. And so they actually, and none of you better do this, they set up their self-directed account, which you need to do as soon as we're done with today. And then they just hold the money. They hold the capital in the account with the idea that they'll wait until the market is quote unquote good again. But here's the thing that you should remember: inflation will kill your stagnant capital. Note investing is inherently inflation and recession resistant if you follow the rules for avoiding fatally flawed investments. There are so many strategies in note investing, and not all of them even require you to originate the note or allocate a large amount of capital toward that note in order to generate returns. So do your research, learn all you can about note strategy, which you're already doing, and take the time to make sure that you have the access that you need to the experts that you need in order to get the information that's right for your self-directed situation. And speaking of that information, let's talk about assets. And let's talk about getting access to the opportunities that are in the right location, that fit your bill for how you want to invest, and that don't have those fatal flaws that might send the whole house of cards tumbling down. This is easy, because what you want to do is actively engage in those opportunities and the right education. And you've heard lots of people talking about this already. It means you need to interact with each other. It means you need to interact with your industry. It means signing up and attending Note Camp. And it means, if you are going to do this using a self-directed account, which you should, that you need to learn more about self-directed investing and get your hands on as many case studies and strategy breakdowns as you possibly can. So for example, our publisher at SD Magazine, Carole Ellis, who you'll hear from tomorrow around 2, routinely hosts some of the most compelling and transparent case studies in multiple asset classes. He picks them apart. He showcases where you could go right and wrong, diagrams everything out that you could possibly need to know in order to make good decisions about all types of self-directed investments, including plenty of case studies on note investing and private lending. And at the same time, of course, you can access a wealth of educational material on sdimagazine.com, including our monthly magazine featuring quarterly, featuring timely, relevant information that every self-directed investor needs, and full of all those if-onlys that your investment professionals wish you knew. And you'll recall I told you earlier, I would be happy to send you a report on how to accelerate the growth of your available investment capital in your self-directed account using note investing strategies. And you can get that report by texting NoteCamp to 555-888. And when you do, I'll make sure you have access to the magazine and all the other news content on the site. So text NoteCamp to 555-888, and I will get that report to you, as well as SDI Magazine access. And thank you, Scott, so much for the opportunity to be here. And if there is any time left, I am happy to take any questions that any of y'all might have. Thank you.
Hey, no problem. Great stuff is all. I love leave that. If you want to leave that slide up, leave it up for a little bit. It's totally fine.
Okay.
Leaving it up there. I did put the note camp to 55-5888 or 555-888 as well there for you. And I'll make sure that everybody gets that in the recap there for you. But such great stuff. I love the rules. I totally agree. I typed in the rule when you're talking about, hey, if you buy a junior lien that you don't control the first, you know, that's a scary situation, investing in seconds, especially now where the only time you should be investing in second or junior liens would be behind a performing first. You got to make sure of that. It's one of the big things of due diligence. So Allison asked, what is the website again? Or do you prefer people to text in to get everything?
Texting is probably the best way.
Okay.
But the website's sdimagazine.com.
SDImagazine.com. There we go. Put that in there. SDI Magazine. Just because sometimes with T-Mobile or other people, they can't text in.
Sure. Plus, they can read your fantastic article.
Yeah, exactly. But you brought some relevant points. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know the specifics. You need to know the clauses and things you need to change in your contracts. That way you're not stuck holding the bag on something you can't collect on, something you can't enforce. And it's such an important aspect of things out there. You know, what would you say to those people out there, excuse me, with less than really 5% of the investment accounts being in self-directed IRAs right now? I'm a big believer that the more educated you are in self-directed IRAs, the more you can help those people that are facing situations right now. Would you agree to that?
As an investor, the more you can help people who are not.
Yeah, because you think about everybody that's been furloughed or taking retirements or being laid off, or they have these 401ks or these retirement accounts, they don't know what to do with them. You know, the more you can tell them about options. And most people just, honestly, if they're not in a real estate investor for the most part, they don't know about the power of, you know, having a self-directed IRA, a truly self-directed account, right?
Right. I understand. No, I do agree. Actually, I thought it was interesting that you guys sort of summed up your panel, that you ended the panel talking a little bit about capital raising. And one of the things that most people don't know is that when Brian started investing in the 90s, that's when he developed his passion for self-directed investors, because he was working with them. As a real estate investor, as a note investor, you need a self-directed account. And I would argue that there is a much larger population of people who should be self-directing than are. However, there are a lot of people who either should not or will never do it. And what better thing could you do as a real estate investor than help people get into real estate? Because I think we all know, as a note investor, as a real estate investor, real estate and real estate related assets are simple, safe, and strong. They are not hard to understand. Done correctly, they're extremely strong. They create great returns. And you really have the ability to educate and also to leverage that capital in ways, assuming that you're responsible with that capital, that could really change their financial future and their ability to live financially free in the future. And that's an incredible gift. And it's also incredible, great power and great responsibility. It's a big responsibility, but it's very important as an investor to be able to talk to other people who are not investors about how and why this works. So you need to know for yourself, and you also need to know so that you can explain it in a way that will make people listen to you. Because otherwise you won't be able to raise that capital, especially not right now when you can't even get in the same room with them.
Yeah, we got a good question from Kat on here. She goes, who are the ones that fall in the category that should not or never use self-directed IRAs? I was going to ask that same question. I love that. Yeah. Who falls in that category?
So, and this is specifically people who should not the people who will simply say, oh, no, I'm sticking in the stock market because my financial advisor's been with me for 40 years. I'm not talking about those people. If you cannot follow, I would say, less than 10 basic rules, if you defer to your tax attorney because, and you're not one yourself, if you are wholly incapable not only of keeping records but also of assigning that process to somebody else if you're not good at it, you probably need to let somebody else handle your retirement investing for you, because self-directing, it gives you control. You have power over those assets, and the IRS expects you to take some responsibility in exchange for those tax advantages. So if you are going to break all the rules, keep horrible records, and think you're the expert about things you know nothing about, you probably should steer clear of self-directed investing. But again, most people do not successfully invest in real estate very long with that particular set of characteristics anyway.
Yeah, I would agree to that. And I will tell everybody who's on here, Brian reached out to me as you got started. We've already changed what he's going to talk about tomorrow. We're going to talk about how to raise $2 to $5 million in one day, the one-day capital raise. And awesome. So excited that, don't get me wrong, he's great. The topic he had in there beforehand, we're excited about that. But when he mentioned me, I was like, oh, that's even a better topic for everybody out there. You were listening in, hearing people talk about that. So I encourage you, if you guys, I know it's Sunday, for some of you it's the Sabbath, come and join us tomorrow. I'm not wrapping up, but make sure you put that in your calendar. We've updated the schedule on Note Camp 2020 to reflect that as well for everybody out there. So, and I would agree, Brian is one of the best. I met Brian, he attended one of my workshops in Atlanta back, I think in 2010, originally 11. And I've always known him as one of the best marketers who's taken other people's content and sharing that in a newsletter, that in sharing his information and what he thought about that is a great way to build a database and become an expert. He has been an expert, but also share expertise out there across the board. And so that was my first introduction. I'm like, oh, you're the database guy that's doing a great job as an investor. Yeah, I love that. And it's amazing to see what you two have done in building a self-directed investor community up and really being advocates for the industry and this product as a whole. You guys are really the leaders in the world. I want to put it out there.
Oh, thank you.
I would say the nation, but a lot of other countries don't do self-directed. So we'll just say the whole world out there for everybody.
I like it.
Yeah. Let's see. We got some questions here. Patricia says, on my website, I have a link to an article from Forbes magazine to learn more about self-directed IRAs. Is it okay for me to link SDI magazine instead? Also, of course it is. Exactly. Yeah. Also, can I use links for you and your other panelists? Yeah, I don't care. That's fine, Patricia. Sure, go right ahead. Can I, Motrice says, I have a Roth IRA. Can I roll it over to a self-directed IRA? Is a question.
Yes. That being said, if you don't have an IRA attorney, we love Tim Berry. And so I say his name as often as possible because he's brilliant. But you need somebody to, don't just get wild and start trying to do that part on your own. Just reach out to an expert and get help with it. But yeah, you absolutely can.
Mm-hmm. Besides talking with other people and mistakes, what's another thing that just kind of drives you bonkers when it comes to investors that don't have self-directed IRAs? Mine is that, okay, $6,000 a year, and most people don't contribute to that. And I'm like, just break it down, $500 a month, put it in a deal, pay yourself first a little bit if you can in your deals. It goes such a long way to add the stuff to that. What's something that kind of drives you bonkers, Carole?
I think it's similar to that. I think that not so much the failure to contribute, because there are a lot of, the reason a lot of people get into real estate is because they have for various reasons. Kids going to college, aging parent. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why people have not begun saving for retirement in a way that lets the system as it used to exist work for them. So it's not so much the failure to contribute, but it kills me when the presentation of the information, I hope nobody will be like, oh, but she was too confusing. When people talk about it in a way that makes it sound like it's something special that only a few people can do, or that if you don't have $100,000, like why even bother? You really can start this with very little. If you tonight go, you need to find a custodian, and I won't do it here because we do not officially endorse any one custodian, but I will tell you personally who I love. You know, if you find a custodian who understands working with real estate investors, who understands the time constraints that you're in, who understands notes, and I have a very good friend who is both a custodian and an active note investor. You don't need to have $1 zillion in capital. And the notion that this is some sort of elite conversation that only 12 people here can have is appalling. And it's also it's such a disservice to everyone in the industry and everyone who is trying their best to save for retirement, even if they are late to the game and they're starting in their 50s. That's why, or your 60s, I mean, we have people who start in their 70s. That's why you do real estate instead of the stock market.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And yes, if you've got an existing IRA or existing 401k from an old job, you can roll it into a self-directed account, the transfer in kind, or you can do they're still allowing the backdoor or the conversions where you can take it from a traditional to a Roth, just pay the taxes and do it on the front end versus the back end, right, Carole?
Mm-hmm. With the caveat, of course, that we are educators. You should talk to your preferred expert.
Yes, talk to your experts there as well out there. What other questions do you have for Carole? Whatever comments do you guys have for Carole here on Note Camp out there? Yeah, not all custodians or trustees are created equal. Now, I want to know who you're talking about. You can text me or email me your recommendations because I think we're on the same page for a lot of times.
We have a whole thing on the website about how to talk to a custodian in advance. Because even as a real estate investor, not all custodians are created equal. I mean, you really need somebody who not only is willing to help you with what you need, but has like a demonstrated track record of doing the things that you want to do. If you say, I don't know, I want to do a 5-year partial, and they're like, what? Maybe that's obscure enough that you are going to have to educate them. But you really, if that's all you do, then you want to probably call Scott and ask who he uses, or somebody who does a lot of that, because you want to make sure that you have an administrator who is not only willing to work with you, but is actually able to work with you.
Mm-hmm. Randy asked a question. Can you add to a traditional and Roth IRA? Can you use more than one account on a note deal?
That would depend. There are people who do that sort of thing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you need to, again, work with an attorney, and not just like your favorite real estate attorney. Like, you need to work with an IRA or 401k, a retirement account attorney, just to make sure that you have all of those things structured so that you are not self-dealing. Because you can do a lot of those things, but you have to make sure that you're not just obeying the spirit, but you're actually also obeying the letter. Because the IRS really doesn't like it when you get benefits today that they wanted you to get 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm. And yes, Randy, you can use, if you've got a Roth account and that you started, and then a traditional that you rolled over, yes, you can take both of those accounts and co-fund a deal. Have them partner up on your deal to fund it, just making sure that they cover the same, whatever the percentage of the deal they're into, the profits to go back into those in that same proportion. So we can talk about that later on a strategy. Also, you can partner with other people's IRA accounts to fund your deals, but make sure you're not doing the wrong thing and self-dealing with your family, the whole self-directed IRA, mother, kids, spouses, or siblings or whatever like that, hey, you can't borrow, okay? Let's see what else we got here. Nathan, can I and my spouse both use self-directed IRA funds on same deal to fund? Yes, you can both use funds to fund the same deal, but you just got to make sure that the percentage go back in proportionally to do that. Yeah, no family all in all. Okay. Kat asks, what's the difference between an EQRP, qualified retirement plan, versus a self-directed IRA, Carole?
I do not know a whole lot about EQRP. My impression is that there are not a massive number of differences, but I would not feel, I'll never tell you I know something I don't. I wouldn't feel wholly confident giving you a really solid answer on that, but I will be happy to find out the answer.
Okay, cool, great, perfect. Good stuff. Any other questions, comments for Carole out here? Sending stuff out. Let's talk about the mag. You said you're sending out quarterly, both digital and in print, right, Carole?
Yes, we did have a bit of a delay with our print run, thanks to our favorite virus. But we do expect both print and digital for Q2 and Q3. Q2 is delayed, but we expect it out in the next week, and Q3 we expect to run on time.
There you go.
And if you go to the website, you can read the digital version, and if you would like the hard copy, we'll send you where to go there once we hear from our printer.
There you go. Now you're also, you and I've had a conversation. If you're an investor, we've got investors on here using their self-directed IRAs. You love case studies too, don't you? To talk about. And so is it okay for people as they are closing deals and doing some of their self-directed IRA to reach out to you and talk about those case studies or write you up a little article?
Please do. I would really appreciate that. If when you text NoteCamp to 555-888, I will get your email address, assuming that you give it to me. And so then you will get that email from the email address that you can use to email me.
Perfect. Good stuff there. Well, hey, we are going to, we got another question here. Perfect. Please post Carole's website. SDImagazine.com. SDImagazine.com for you, Dan. Yeah. Self-directed investor magazine. If you want to use a little tool called Google, out there for them as well there for you. So once again, Carole, I want to say thank you so much for coming on Note Camp. Be safe there in Atlanta. Looking forward to hanging out with Brian a little bit tomorrow as well too. If we can do anything for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. But thanks for delivering such great content here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Carole. See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, guys and gals.